So just a couple words about how I'm doing my new reloading process because I'm kind of just starting over. I've decided to basically forget most of what I knew, and the reason why is stumbled across the channel Little Crow Gunworks, and he details out his reloading process and leaves out a bunch of the BS and more or less a bunch of the snake oil that a lot of other shooters and reloaders have been telling people for years. And he kind of calls out all their bull and then basically just explains why it doesn't really matter. Some of the things that people do with reloading or with regards to reloading, and he just details out exactly what really matters to get really good performance out of your ammunition as far as precision goes. And I've been doing things the wrong way for a long time. I thought I knew a decent amount about reloading, but obviously I've I've been doing it wrong. And so starting over with this new 300 WSM barrel on my Savage rifle, I've decided to just kind of start from scratch and use his reloading process, or at least most of it. And I might add a couple steps in there just for my peace of mind that he would say doesn't really matter, but for me, it's just peace of mind. It's not gonna hurt anything. But basically, right now I'm just loading to fireform this brass. So this is just new Lapua brass, and I bought 200 cases of this stuff, and then so I'm just fireforming it to the rifle, and then I will resize it from there. And then when I'm done with that and loading it to actually produce performance, I'm going to be using a better powder than this. This is just some powder I had. This is an old jug of powder, and if you look at the price on it, it was only $33 bought in a store. So it was probably that powder is probably at least 10 years old, and I got it from somebody, I'm not sure who, unopened obviously, but it seems to be shooting okay. I just loaded a mild load just for fireforming these 178 grain ELDMs. I'm not trying to hot rod them, and that's one of the big things that I'm going to quit doing with my brass and with my rifles, is trying to just push the maximum amount of performance out of them as far as speed goes, because I've been doing that lately, and I got into doing that because I wanted to push my little 16-inch 308 to a mile, and I've gotten there with it. I have actually made a hit at a mile with it, though when you're pushing that little rifle and that little round to its limits, as far as pressure goes and speed goes and everything, because in that 16-inch barrel, using my Garmin chronograph, I was pushing 208 grain bullets upwards of 2,400 plus feet per second, which if you go and actually look at how much pressure I'm running, it's overpressured. It definitely is. Like, it's probably 70,000 plus psi at that point, around 70,000 psi, and so it's beating the shit out of my brass doing it. And I've actually noticed that when I've reloaded the brass after pushing it that hot, the reloads are not nearly as good anymore. The consistency's gone to crap and everything. And Tim at Little Crow Gunworks actually kind of mentioned about that, is that when you push the brass that hard, it changes the metallurgy of the brass kind of, and it loses its elasticity and everything. It loses its spring back, and it because you basically ruined it. And so I've ruined a bunch of 308 brass pushing that rifle as hot as it'll go, with a reasonable amount of accuracy. Like, that rifle can shoot really small, but pushing it that hot, it basically shoots about 1 minute average, but every once in a while I'll get a group in a half-minute area. Most of the time it's 1 minute or around 1 minute of angle, and then sometimes it can be 1.5 or 2 minutes for a particular group. It's just because I'm pushing it way too hard, and the brass at this point is no good. So I'm going to be starting over with 308 as well. I picked up 100 cases of Lapua 308 brass, and I'm going to be starting fresh with that, and I'm no longer going to be hot rodding it, and I'm just going to load it for precision only. I'm not really going to worry about how fast it's going. I just want it to be a half minute or less. Same thing with this rifle. Once I get it broke in, once I get about 150 to 200 rounds on it, and it's actually settled in and the barrel's no longer speeding up, then I'll start loading just for precision. So I'm going to quit using, there's nothing wrong with this type of powder. It's ball powder. It shoots, and a lot of times I'm a big fan of Haitian powder just because it's easy to come by. I can find it most often locally, and I can find the exact type of powder that I'm looking for most of the time. I don't have to order it. And so I've got a bunch of it. And I've got some ramshot powder that I like too. But I think I'm gonna test out some ramshot powder, just because I have a few pounds of it, and then I'm probably gonna test out that. I'm gonna test out some Vitavori, and from what I've seen in GRT, kind of running some simulations with the weight bullet that I want to run, about a 200 grain bullet in this rifle, the Vitavori powder seems to be the perfect burn rate for it. The Vitavori N560 seems to have the perfect burn rate for the 300 WSM with a 200 grain bullet. But like I said, right now I'm just fire forming this brass before I get into all that. And so I've got it zeroed at 100 yards. I know with the load I'm using with this Winchester 780 Supreme and the 178 grain ELDs, it's running around 3,100 feet per second, so it's pretty mild compared to what this thing could do with this 31-inch barrel on here, because that is a freaking beast of a barrel. But it could be capable of, and I know this because I shot some factory ammo through it, some 180 grain like Norma hunting rounds, and those things were averaging 3,320 feet per second. Some of them would be up in like 3360s and stuff with a 180 grain, and I also shot some 150 grain factory ammo, and that stuff was running over 3,400. It was like 3,410, 3,420, somewhere in there with a 150 grain. So like just screaming hot, hunting rounds. And I wasn't really expecting much out of them, because that was like the first 10 rounds I shot down the barrel, first 20 rounds I shot through this barrel, and they didn't shoot particularly well. And I think it was probably because they were going so fast, because most of the time with that hunting ammunition, you're shooting them out of a hunting rifle with a hunting type barrel, so like a 22, 24-inch barrel, and this is a 31-inch barrel, so, when you're 7, 8, 10 inches longer, you're going to get quite a bit more speed, on average about 25 feet per inch. So that sounds about right. It's about 250 to about 250, 250 feet per second more than what the box says that ammo is supposed to do. And that's about what I got out of it. And the thing is, though, the accuracy was not great. Like, it shot basically a 3-inch group at 100 yards, which, of course, that was just the first 20 rounds down the tube. And when I actually shot 10 rounds of my hand-loaded ammunition, I just shot 10 down through it after I shot those 20. And my 10 rounds actually did, with no actual load development. I just put a mild charge in there, what I knew, just some data that I looked up on the internet, and shot it. And obviously it was mild because it was only running about 3,100. Of course, I just seated the bullets where I think around 18-20 thousandths off the lands is, and and shot them, and the grouping was about an inch. It shot about 1 inch at 100 yards, which that's okay. You know, I'm using a mediocre powder. I'm using a mediocre bullet, and I haven't done any fine tuning with seating depth, and I haven't done any fine tuning with powder charge. So 1 inch doesn't really bother me on a brand new barrel, especially when I know it's going to change over the next 150 plus more rounds that I shoot through it. Likely the barrel's going to speed up and do its thing before it gets settled in, you know. So basically, that's about it. I'll get more into the details of my loading, how I'm going to start loading this ammunition when we get there, but for now, I'm just kind of loading up just some rounds to just go play with. Tomorrow we're going to go out on the pipeline. We're just going to see how it does. We're going to set up a target at 500 and then one at somewhere around 1300, 1250 to 1300, and then we'll have one set at right at a mile. We're going to try to actually set one at a mile. We go out there sometimes and we're like, we're going to set a target up in a mile today, and then it ends up being 1850 or 1900 yards or something, you know, past a mile, or it ends up being closer than a mile. It ends up being like 1600 or something, and we're like, crap, but we shoot it anyway. So we're actually going to go out intentionally and try to set one up at a mile or really close to it, which I think will be fun. And these little 178 ELDs should get to a mile at 3100. Shouldn't have a problem getting them there. It's shooting about 1 MOA right now, so I'm not expecting just a ton of hits on a target that far away with 1 MOA accuracy. And likely it's going to change throughout the day as it heats up and as the barrel gets more rounds on it. My points of impact are going to shift all over the place, and I fully expect that, but we're going to go out and have fun anyway and just see what happens. So that's just kind of what I wanted to go over this morning right now, and we'll see you out there on the pipeline tomorrow. Thanks for watching.